Yeah, hello. I think I'm live now. Well, I know I'm alive, but I think I'm live and able to talk to people in the wonderful world outside. I wonder what you're doing today. Are you doing anything special? It's a day that's got a special name, so maybe you're doing something special. In fact, it's a day that's got many special names. Do they all mean the same thing? Well, it's Tuesday, which can mean Cheers Day. So that's one meaning of the name, Tuesday. But then it's called Mardi in French, other languages. And sometimes this is a special Tuesday, so it gets called Mardi Gras or Fat Tuesday. Why do I laugh when I think of Fat Tuesday? Well, fat is kind of like a word that you use carefully because it can be used in the wrong context and be very hurtful. But also, if it's used on a skillet, then the word fat is very good. Because if you put fat on your skillet and your skillet on the fire, then it's ready to cook things. And today is a day when you cook pancakes. So this is my skillet. It's a Viking skillet. Yeah, it's really quite handy. It's got a nice long handle, so I can hold it over a fire. It's got a good broad dish so that I can fit lots of pancakes on this at once. And another word for skillet is pan. So frying pan, skillet. So when you put batter onto a skillet or onto a pan, you get pancakes because they're the cakes you cook on a pan rather than the cakes you cook in an oven. And building an oven is a lot more hard work, but it's worth it in the end, isn't it? A good reward. So today I'm going to tell a story about Thor and Loki, and I'm going to start that at 2 o'clock. Beforehand though, I thought, well, just to say hello to people, I'd finished mixing my pancake batter, and say hello if you're there. Say hello if you can hear me. Perhaps more importantly, say hello if you can't hear me, because that would be a bad thing, because I'd just be blethering away to the wind. Not that that's such a bad thing to do every now and then. So, what words have I used so far? Skillet. Oops. Which is another name for a pan. Tuesday. After the Viking god Tyr, who is Tyr the One-Handed. And what happened to his other hand? Those of you who know the tales will know. And I think I've told it from the floating monastery on the Tuesday before. Yeah, one of his hands got eaten by Fenris the wolf. I'm thinking too much of beating now. So Tuesday, Fat Tuesday, Mardi Gras. Another word for it is Shrove Tuesday, and that's a word that it's a kind of old word, and the meaning of that is really, well, it doesn't make any sense in modern English. But Shrove comes from Shriven, and it means to be forgiven. So it could be Forgiven Tuesday. That doesn't really make much sense. But maybe it's a day when you remember things that are forgiven. That would be cool. A day to celebrate, to enjoy being able to have butter that you can put on your skillet and cook pancakes. The day when you can remember that the eggs are being laid by your hens, so you can crack them into a bowl and mix them up and make pancakes. Put some honey in there as well, make them nice and sweet. All sorts of good stuff. Because on Wednesday tomorrow gets known as Ash Wednesday, and that's a day when a journey called Lent starts. And it remembers 40 days in the wilderness that Jesus took. And people following in his pattern ever since. 40 days of fasting, not celebrating, eating differently, remembering the darker side of life. So today I'm going to tell you a story about a journey, and it's a journey of adventure, and there are challenges in it which have to be faced and defeated, which makes it an adventure story rather than a story of pain and misery. So here we go, and the story starts out with Loki flying like a falcon around the 9 worlds, because he liked doing that, and he was really curious, was Loki. So he landed on the fence of a house and looked in up in Jotunheim, the land of the giants, the Jotun. And looking in, he saw stuff going on inside the house. But the Jotun inside saw him too, and saw this falcon perched on the fence around his house. And something looked a bit funny about the falcon. So the person living in the house, the Jotun, sent a servant to go and catch the falcon and bring it down. Loki laughed as the servant tried to get to the top of the fence and couldn't because it was too small. And then Loki's laughing turned into a "Nyah! Nyah!" because the servant went and got a ladder and stuck the ladder up against the fence and started to climb the ladder. And that falcon should have just been able to fly off. But there was a weaving of magic into the fence that meant that Loki was stuck to the rampart. And the servant grabbed him by the legs, cut the head, bent down and took it over to the Jotun, who was the lord of the house. And the lord of the house, he looked at the bird and he saw there was something odd about the eyes and reckoned that it was no ordinary bird, which was quite right. So he put the bird that was Loki in a box and kept him there for a good long time until he could be sure that when Loki came out the box, Loki would be ready to talk. And Loki had indeed turned back into normal Loki shape rather than falcon shape, and was really hungry and thirsty. The giant said, "I will only let you go if you promise to bring Thor back up here, and Thor without his hammer or any tricks, so that he can face me 1-to-1 in a fight." Well, what could Loki do? His curiosity had got him into a place he couldn't get out of, except by agreeing to do what had been said. So Loki went all the way back to Asgard to find Thor and to tell him that there was an adventure to go on. Well, Thor was pretty much up for adventures, and Loki, Odin, Thor, they all hung out together. They'd gone walking with Honir in the early days of the world. And Thor, pretty strong, pretty tough, he reckoned he could do this. So they set out on the journey to Jotunheim. On the way though, they had to stop overnight because it's a long way, and they stopped at the house of one of Odin's Jotun friends called Grief. And while they were visiting Grief heard that they were going to journey up to this other Jotun's house, this other giant's house. And Grief thought, well, do you remember when you went to Jotunheim and all the tricks that were played on you there? In Utgard? Well, this one you're going to visit, he's called Spear Reddener, and he's called that because his spear is always red with the blood of his enemies, and he has all sorts of tricks and all sorts of games that he'll play on you. So here, I've got some gifts for you, and they are things which will help you in this journey. I have a belt of strength, a girdle of might. I have gloves, that means that you can hold the hottest thing. And I have a staff, a wand, a stick, a staff of power. And these things, they will help you in your journey. "Ah, thanks," said Thor. And Loki looked on, always looking, always cunning, always thinking what was happening. they started out again. And the first challenge they had is they had to cross a massive river. And it was spring, so all the snow in the mountains was melting, and the river was flowing in flood. So Thor started to cross over with the belt of might around him, the staff in his hand, using the staff to make 3 legs for himself so that he could walk across. But when he was in the middle, with Loki hanging on a belt at the back for dear life, the river just erupted in a massive flood, and he saw, causing the flow from higher up the hill, another Jotun, and one leg on either side of the river. It was, well, stuff was flowing out for miles and masses, and Thor was almost carried away in the flood. But he got his other hand and he threw a rock and plugged the hole, so he was able to get across the river, grabbing hold of a rowan branch on the side of the river to pull himself out of the bank. Well, that was a difficult task, he thought, and Loki, letting go of the belt of might, said, yeah, well, you're up for it, you could do it, no worries. I knew you could do it, I believed you had it in you. But still, they were cold and they were wet and they were damp when they arrived at the hall of Reddener. And they found, as they were going into the rooms, there was just one room that they could wait in, and it was like a goat shed, and there was only one seat in it. So, of course, Thor, having done the most of the work, sat down on the seat. But while he was in the room, it's almost as if things started to spin around him, and the walls almost started to close in, and the ceiling started to look really, really close as he was moving up, and he realised he was moving up towards the ceiling, and if he didn't do something quickly, he would be crushed against it between the seat and the ceiling. Squish! Like Thor jam. So quickly, he grabbed hold of the staff and he stuck it up onto the ceiling, and with the belt of might and the staff, he pushed and pushed, and there was a massive cracking noise. And suddenly he started to fall back down to the floor again. So he got off and he looked up. He looked underneath the seat and he found 2 huge Jotun, 2 huge giants under there who'd been pushing up against the ceiling to squish him. But when Thor had pushed himself with the staff and the belt, he'd broken their backs and had escaped that trap. And Loki said, yeah, see, I knew you had it in you. I knew you'd be able to do it. Well done. And Thor was like, oh, right, I'm going to meet the host, and I'm going to greet his inhospitability with more inhospitability and rage and fury, because, well, he started to draw the lightning down from the sky. It blazed in his eyes as he flung open the door to the inner chambers. What was it like there in this cavern in the mountains? There was lava flowing down either side of the hall, and standing, heating a bar of iron like a spear in the fire, was Reddener. Reddener grabbed some tongs and lifted the iron bar out of the lava and hurled it at Thor with a might that only a Jotun could summon. But Thor, wearing the gloves he'd been given to him by grief, caught the bar in mid-air, spun it around and threw it back at Reddener. Reddener had dodged behind a stone pillar. To be safe, he thought. But no, Thor's throw went straight through the pillar and straight through Reddener and splattered against the other side, because, it was red hot iron. Well, said Loki, that was an interesting challenge. Yes, said Thor. Are you to blame for it? And Loki said, yeah, I suppose, in a way I am. But I knew you had it in it, and I knew you could do it. And besides, this is a lot better than the last party that you went to. You remember that wedding you went to where you were about married and you had to go and kill all the guests? And Thor thought for a while and thought, yeah, you're right. And then he laughed with a deep rumbling laugh that roared like thunder throughout the mountains. And they went around looting the house of Reddener, putting things into sacks, kegs, everything they could carry, and they walked back down to Asgard, and there they had a party. Now, that's the end of that story. And there are many who will try and find deep meanings in it, and maybe there are meanings in it. But mostly, today, the thing I'm thinking of is it's about a story, about a journey, and a journey which is hard. But tough journeys make for better parties at the end. Cold days mean you appreciate the warmth of the fire when you sit down at it. But you have to understand and be in the story before it makes that kind of sense. When you're looking from the outside at something, it can look very strange if you don't understand what's going on. It's kind of that way with Lent. On the one hand, it looks like people are giving stuff up, giving up lots of stuff, making a sacrifice. It's a complicated word, but it kind of means giving up something for a purpose. One way of understanding it. And if you just see somebody making a sacrifice, then it's quite easy to think they're making a foolish sacrifice, or even a brutal sacrifice. But if you're the one who's doing it, it can appear very different. Like, imagine for a moment a princess who has lost a ring, a very precious ring. She knows it's somewhere in her room, but she just can't find it. So, what would she do? Well, she'd go looking for it, of course. And maybe she would spend all day. She would look underneath the sheets. She'd go underneath the bed. She'd maybe light a lamp so that she could look in the really, really dark corners. And anyone watching her from outside would see that she's doing a lot of hard work. And maybe they would just think she was tidying up, which is a good thing to do. But it's not something you tend to do for fun. And maybe they look a bit closer and they would see that she was hunting for something, and they would understand that as a good thing to do. But still, it's a pain. But the princess, the one who's looking for that missing ring, she knows the ring is there. She knows that the work she's putting in must have a good reward at the end of it. So while she's caught up in the task, it's a joy almost. And when she finds the ring at the end, that's a time to celebrate. Because a ring that was lost is now a ring that is found. And if it was a special ring, then maybe it becomes all the more special because it was once lost and now found. Some of you know of a place near here where a princess is buried. Princess Margaret, buried in Lincluden. And it's called a collegiate church now, but there was a church built there, and well, it was there before Princess Margaret, but it was redesigned, redecorated when she died. And people from, they got in people, architects, stonemasons from France. They had people doing beautiful stained glass windows. They would have had people painting pictures on the walls. And if you go in there still, you can see carved into the walls goblets for drinking wine, grapes, and the badges of honour of all of the people who knew Margaret. Why would you do that? Why would you build a big building for someone who's dead? It seems a bit vain, doesn't it? The time to do nice things for somebody is when they're alive and standing next to you. And now the building is ruined. And when you go there, you just see stones with maybe people's rubbish thrown around, or where somebody's set fire to something. And that is, well, it's a sad sight. It doesn't really look like a thing of celebration. But if you go in, or if you talk to people from there and you learn about the monkey cage, or you learn about all the secrets and stories that are told about the building, then the building has a layer of meaning. If you meet people who've been there and have gone there for the peace and quiet, right back to the time of Robert Burns and before, who wrote poetry about it, then that adds another layer of meaning. If you stand in the place that would have been the sanctuary and you look at the pictures, well, you imagine the pictures on the wall, look at the carvings, look at the layout and all the bits you can still see, and imagine all the stuff that was on the walls, then you can remember that one time there was a princess here whose life and whose works and whose actions were so respected by the community that they needed to build, or they wanted to build, something that celebrated her life when she died. Celebrated her links to the King of Scotland, celebrated her links to the Douglases. And they did it in a church, because doing things in that place for them linked her life with the life of all Christians, living and dead. All people who've shared a similar journey that's been hard at times, that's gone wrong at times, that involves days of celebration and making pancakes, and days of not eating pancakes and remembering the toughness of life and choosing to go without things so we can understand what it's like to not have things, understand how tough life can be sometimes. So tough that you want the stones on the ground to turn into bread so you can eat, or so tough that you eat leather just to have something in your belly. So next time you are walking around, including Collegiate Church, stand in the sanctuary. That's the first area uphill you come to. Look through the gaps in the walls where there used to be windows and stained glass, and maybe you'll see the colour in the sky. A more beautiful window than any of us could make. Maybe you'll see the carvings on the walls. Maybe you'll see the badges that link the names of Margaret with the people around her. Have a look at them. Take time to think about the links in your life, the beauty in your life, the things that are eternal and true that can make you the person you want to be. Remember the princess, remember the journeys, and find peace and strength so that you can go and you can try difficult things. Even if the difficult things you've kind of been lured into by a mischievous half-brother. Because it's only through trials and adversity that we find out just how strong we are and what we can do, and learn to be resilient. But I think that's probably the end of what I have to say today. And hopefully you've enjoyed the story. And hopefully you enjoyed the story as much as I'm going to enjoy going and making some pancakes. And yeah, make sure you get rid of the lumps. Nothing worse than lumps in your pancakes. And I think there are other videos on the Lift activities, Lift D&G activities page, which will be showing you how to make the pancakes and mix them. So I haven't done that. Tomorrow, if I am successful in the task I'm going to set myself, I'm going to try and find somebody to help me show how to braid cord and make really pretty bracelets, because it's a two-person thing, and although I might be able to do it myself, it'd be really tricky, and if I could find somebody else to join me in the floating monastery and help, then that would be great. But otherwise, whether you call this Pancake Day, Shrove Tuesday or Mardi Gras, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope the story of your life exceeds all of your expectations. Thank you very much for watching and listening, and I'll see you again.